Political-wise, not one single person has reached out.
Officially?
Officially, yeah. Not one person.
That was Siobhan White, the mother of Rhiannon White, who was murdered by an illegal migrant. She's got a message for the Prime Minister, and she's going to join me in the studio very shortly. Meanwhile, teachers in Labour-run councils have been advised that children's drawings could be considered blasphemous under Sharia law, while music and dance lessons may conflict with Islamic teachings. You've heard that? All right. That's according to guidance designed to help teachers adapt to religious sensitivities issued by councils in the north of England. The document, titled Sharing the Journey, states this: for some Muslim parents, sensitivities may exist in connection with teaching of aspects of art, dance, drama, music, physical education, religious education and RSHE. It's very important that the school understands this and is also careful not to ask its students to reproduce images of Jesus, the Prophet Muhammad or other figures considered to be prophets in Islam. Some Muslim pupils may not wish to draw a human figure. The advice was published in Kirklees, the council area that covers Batley Grammar School. Protests erupted outside that school in 2021 after a teacher who still remains in hiding showed a caricature of the Prophet Muhammad in class. Well, we're now joined by Director of Domestic Policy at Pickthall House, Jacob Williams. Jacob, thank you very much for joining me this evening. I think many people will say that we're a country where blasphemy laws no longer exist, and therefore every religion should be free to be mocked, even if it is offensive. It's part of growing up in our society. What would you say to those claims, Jacob?
Well, I'd say that I completely agree. And as a Muslim representing a think tank run by British Muslims, our position is that we don't need, we must not have blasphemy laws in this country. We must have complete freedom of speech, people of all religions or none. What I do think, however, is that we should distinguish between two things. And one is violence and intimidation directed against this teacher who apparently is still in hiding, which is an absolute disgrace, and he must be protected to be brought out of hiding. Anyone who threatens him must face the full force of the law. The other is cultural sensitivities. These are two different things. So this guidance is not about saying, oh, we're going to surrender to the angry mob outside the school and let them intimidate and threaten people with death. It's about saying, let's maybe not force people to do things that they think is against their interpretation of a religion in school, which in a sense is completely reasonable. Now, in the context, it was obviously inappropriate to say, oh, the issue is it might be considered blasphemy under Islamic law. That isn't the right way to approach this. I don't think children should be made to draw pictures of Muhammad or Jesus or anyone else. As for these other issues about art, drawing any pictures, music, these are issues of integration. They're not issues of extremism. So let's not conflate the two things. Let's deal with violence properly. Let's also have a sensible approach to integration and not mix the two things up.
Yeah, Jacob, people would, again, point to the history of Britain where actually drawing religious figures is perfectly acceptable. Perhaps around Christmas, kids will be asked to draw pictures of Mary, Joseph, baby Jesus. This is something that has been done for a very, very long time. And in the United Kingdom, drawing a picture of the Prophet Muhammad shouldn't be perhaps a problem either. And by issuing guidance like this, might be seen to be pushing the boundaries into a new era of perhaps censorship around religion that isn't something that has been historically the case in Britain.
Well, there's a difference between a school telling, or a council or a set of councils telling schools maybe don't force kids to draw pictures of Jesus or Muhammad if they don't want to, which is perfectly reasonable in and of itself. Obviously, the context makes it look different, understandably, and having an actual law forbidding this. So that's a totally different thing. And conflating the two isn't going to help us deal with the actual problem.
Sure. Jacob, the other day, of course, we saw the Labour government announce this new social cohesion strategy. As part of that, there's some concerns around this anti-Muslim hostility, guidance, I think is what they're calling it, right? It's not going to be statutory, but guidance. Right. Some of that contains monitoring in schools. Is there a concern, again, that whilst not being statutory, we're erring in that direction again of monitoring perhaps children who might say things that, as kids, might just be a little bit out of tow, or they might have heard something and repeat it by accident? Or is there a concern now that we're teaching kids to tread on eggshells around each other? And I'll tell you what my concern for that would be, Jacob, would be that actually kids don't grow up in a society where they feel they can express themselves and may indeed get themselves into trouble or be deemed Islamophobic when they're actually having a debate or a discussion which perhaps they're not quite educated enough to have yet, and they may do that in an insensitive way and be punished for it.
Sure. Look, we completely agree. And this is actually one of the problems with the current prevent strategy, which isn't really directed against actual terrorists or people likely to become terrorists. It's directed against children writing stories about Palestine in school or against so-called far-right activists who are not really violent either. So we don't need to be having this hypersensitive woke culture, which goes well beyond just people talking about Islam or Muslims as well. We should distinguish that from cases of actual threats of violence, which need to be dealt with the full force of the law and cracked down on. This issue of should you have guidance about what is anti-Muslim hatred or Islamophobia? Well, look, we've had an anti-Semitism czar for 7 years. Having an anti-Muslim hatred czar isn't in itself unreasonable either. It's simply parity. It's enforcing the law equally. But I completely agree there's a wider problem of this woke, hypersensitive culture that concerns many groups and absolutely needs to be addressed. And we shouldn't be walking on eggshells. We should have robust freedom of speech everywhere.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me. That's Jacob Williams, Director of Domestic Policy at Pickthall House. Thank you very much for a good chat this evening.